So, folks, we need to talk a little bit about Josh Shapiro. Now, Josh Shapiro wants to be president. It's pretty clear that he has a desire to do this. He, of course, wants to, leverage his position as Pennsylvania's governor to make a play for the White House in 2028. That much is very clear to me. He's doing podcast tours right now, and he went on Pod Save America. And I thought it was really interesting that towards the end of the interview, he talks about the politics of Israel. And one of the things that Josh Shapiro has kind of fallen into is like this idea of, well, Israel is fine. It's just Netanyahu that's bad. We should be pro-Israel, but, anti-Netanyahu, essentially. And I'm curious if he's going to try and rehabilitate his image prior to a presidential run and like take a more critical stance towards Israel, even if out of a cynical desire to become president. So let's take a look here, folks. Let's just dive in. I don't want to watch the entire Pod Save America episode. I find Pod Save America difficult to stomach. It's not my cup of tea. But let's check out this particular section.
So it was genuinely surprising to see the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, basically say we had to act because Israel was going to go first, and they've tried to walk that back. That has fed into, I think, some of the kind of...
Wait, do Dems get anything out of supporting Israel other than genocide money? So an important component to understand is that for years and years and years, essentially they were offered money with almost no strings attached. Like, oh, you want to support, do you want to say you support Israel? Yeah, here's a bunch of money for your reelection. Okay. And it has only been very recently that has become like a huge issue within the Democratic Party. And so part of it is that a lot of institutional and establishment Democrats have become used to that money and rely on that money to get reelected. And another part of it is that these groups back candidates that already agree with them, right? And so these groups, like the Democrats that we're talking about here, they do genuinely believe in a pro-Israel position as well, And so that's kind of the issue here. Like, what they are getting out of it is the money, but in a lot of their minds, they don't even see it as really a transaction. They see it as, this is my genuine stance, and they just support my genuine stance. It's not like they didn't have the stance and were paid to adopt the stance. It in a lot of cases, they just have always genuinely had the stances that they have, So it's not so much that they are getting something else out of this other than money. It's more so they already had the stance, and then the money reinforced the stance and kept them in power.
Anti-Semitism you see on the far right, a bit of what you also see on the left, that we're in this war because of Israel. It's brought us back to this debate over Israel. Governor Gavin Newsom, when talking to John and Tommy on Pod Save America, he was referencing an article by Thomas Friedman, but he said that people are talking about Israel appropriately as sort of an apartheid state. And I'm wondering what your reaction is to that comment and what it tells you about how the politics on Israel have shifted.
Well, look, Gavin should speak for Gavin, and I'm not going to weigh in on his commentary. I'll just say, look, I think that there are sort of foundational issues here that a lot of people are grappling with. And I think a lot of people are grappling with it from an honestly held view or concern. I'll come back to the comment about, or I'll come back to answering your question about apartheid, because I think that was the comment he made, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. But I sort of start this conversation around the notion of the question a lot of people raise now is, does Israel even have the right to exist? Should we sort of be viewed?
God, I'm so sick of this question. You know, like, do nation states have the right to exist? No, but nation states do exist because in order to form a nation state, you have to have the power to create and maintain a state. And like, there's no inherent right to a nation state. You have the power to make it so, or you don't. Right? It's an annoying question that is largely irrelevant because there's not a fundamental right to a state. There's a fundamental right to exist as like a group of people. There's a fundamental right to, life and liberty and so forth. But like, when you're talking about the existence of a state is a power structure. A state is like the essentially, when you really boil it down, the might of a military that supports a group and enforces its laws and enforces its boundaries, etc. Like, that's really what it is when you boil it down. And so the idea of whether or not Israel has a right to exist is irrelevant because Israel does exist and it has a very strong military to perpetuate its existence. And so when we are talking about this issue, like, oh, do they have a right to exist? That's not really at all what is being debated by anybody in this situation. There might well be people who, wish that the state of Israel did not exist. There might, just as there are certainly people who wish that the American state did not exist. Certainly as there are people who wish that the state of China didn't exist or the state of Russia didn't exist. However, the wishes of these people are irrelevant in the face of the power structures that support the continuance of what is known as the state of China or Russia or the United States or Israel, right? These places are these nation states are perpetuated by their ability to use force to, essentially assert their power structures and social structures.
Viewing, Israel as an ally? Should they even be allowed to exist? And I would argue, as someone who is desirous for peace, as someone who for the last 15, nearly 20 years has been calling for a two-state solution, which I realize feels very far away right now. I get that. But the idea of Israel and a Palestinian state where both recognize the other's right to exist, both want to live peacefully, and both
again, and this is why the two-state issue irritates the fuck out of me, especially through this particular lens of like, oh, well, we think that the Palestinian state has the right to exist and the Israeli state has the right to exist, and we need to get to a situation where both sides agree that the other has the right to exist. Except that, like, when we're talking about a Palestinian state, no one ever talks about the ability for a Palestinian state to utilize power or force of arms in order to assert its right to exist, in order to assert its existence. In the same way that, like, China has the ability to assert its national boundaries and has the ability to, utilize a military force to, support its own power structure. No one ever talks about any kind of theoretical Palestinian state that way. They talk about a Palestinian state as essentially a subjugated province of Israel, right? And so, like, it's a weird framing that inherently lends more credence in the unspoken nature of the question, right? Because if you're trying to frame it as like rights to exist versus power structures, it's very clear that the power structure that exists right now is in Israel. And Israel has that power structure, while the Palestinian territories and occupied territories have been systematically denied that ability for decades. And so I think that is the reason why oftentimes this conversation gets framed through right to exist versus the power structure to exist.
recognize that the future for their children is going to be rooted and the foundational principle will be around this idea of peace, because that will allow their children to grow up in a society where they can be whatever they want to be. I want peace. And for those who begin by suggesting Israel doesn't have the right to exist as a Jewish state, I think that is a recipe for permanent war. And so I want to see peace in the region. I also do think it's sort of interesting that you've got 46 nations around the world where the majority religion is Islam. 23 of them.
Also, I'm not going to allow any kind of anti-Semitism from chat. So don't do that. Don't do that shit. Fuck. It's not too much to ask, guys. Israel is a let me just like be straight up in this section here. Israel is a nation state. Nation states are not religions. Those are two different things. And if I fucking see you guys conflating Judaism with Israel, I'm gonna lose it on you. Because that's not at all the thing. Like, you're doing the exact same shit Republicans do with, like, Iran and Islam. You know, you're doing the exact same shit. And I have no time for it. If your hatred of what is happening to the people of Gaza, and you should, by the way, hate the genocide that is being perpetrated against the people of Gaza, but you conflate your hatred of what Israel as a nation state is doing with Jews in general and Judaism as a religion, you are engaged in anti-Semitism. Criticize the state and the actions of the state. Do not conflate the actions of a state with the broader religion. This should seem pretty obvious, I would think, and I would hope, but I am going to explicitly say it here so that folks don't accidentally stumble into that. Is saying you don't need an ethnostate to protect Jewish people okay? Yeah, you can be anti-ethnostate. Absolutely. Everyone should be anti-ethnostate. But criticizing a nation and what the actions of a state is different than saying that state represents all members of a religion. Don't do it. Don't do that shit.
Recognize Islam as the official state religion. One has the official state religion of Judaism, and that's the one we keep talking about here. That then leads to a broader question. You mentioned apartheid, right? Or that was the comment that was made. And I would just say, as we engage in that, we should first address this fundamental question of what do we want in that region? And if we really want peace, and I believe you want that, then we've also got to be acknowledging that language matters here, that words matter, and that we've got to use words that are actually rooted in reality and are able to bring the temperature down to create a space for that.
This really bothers me, okay? So Josh Shapiro here is saying apartheid is too charged of a word. There's quite literally a different system of law within Israel than there is for the people in the occupied territories who have lived under Israeli occupation for their entire lives. There are two different legal systems at play. One is military law and the other is Israeli law. Additionally, Israeli law treats different groups of people differently. Everyone is not equal and treated the same under Israeli law. There are ethnic enclaves of different types of Israelis that are allowed that prohibit like Arab or Palestinian folks who live in Israel from settling in those neighborhoods, from living down the street from their Jewish neighbors. And like, that is backed up by Israeli law. That's a problem. And when you say, well, it's not an apartheid state, just fucking look at what's happening to the West Bank, dude. Israel has been illegally building settlements in the West Bank. Let me bring up a map. West Bank map. Let's just take a look at this Reuters investigation from last year. How Israel's West Bank strategy aims to bury Palestinian statehood.
I, an American Jew, fully oppose the right of the State of Israel to exist, especially as a Jewish ethnostate. I even blame the people in part as one of two.
Interesting. Sake Tanuki, thank you for the 5 tier 1 subs. I mean, I do think that there is a rampant degree of Zionism at play in Israel, which, if you don't feel comfortable using the phrase or the word Zionism, you could just say settler colonialism, because Zionism is effectively the same thing as settler colonialism. It's just more specific. The Oslo Accords in 1993 were the closest Israelis and Palestinians ever came to a peace deal. They divided the West Bank into 3 zones of control. Area A, which is the solid green. Area B is... Area A, by the way, the solid green is Palestinian Authority. Area B, the striped zones, are joint control. And Area C is all Israeli military control. So when they call it the occupied territory, it's because most of the territory under the Oslo Accords is occupied by the Israeli military, meaning the vast majority of the West Bank is under a completely different legal system, including, by the way, the joint control areas where Israeli military law supersedes any kind of other law. However, as you can see, you then get military bases and settlements and bypass roads and roadblocks in different jurisdictions.
No, their polling support is in the 80s plus for most of the measures.
It's true.
It needs to be dismantled and fully re-educated from the get-go. They can too.
I do think that, like, I genuinely don't know how the de-radicalization and the deprogramming of the settler colonial mentality, I don't know what the path forward is for Israel and Israelis. I genuinely have no idea how they break this cycle. It just continues to get reinforced. And then you have the proliferation of settlements here. Obviously, you can see getting bigger and bigger and bigger as time goes by. To say that this is not an apartheid state when Israelis in the West Bank can roll up. We covered a story not that long ago about Israelis rolling up and killing an American citizen in the West Bank who was trying to protect, like, his family's sheep, because the settlers just came to steal the sheep.
If Israel ever did become a full Jewish state, their government would immediately shift from Jewish supremacist to Ashkenazi supremacist and start oppressing Mizrahi, Sephardi, and Ethiopian Jews.
Well, and let's be also clear, there is already some pretty strong suppression of Ethiopian
Live in
Jews.
the Palestinian state, as a sizable minority, but not be taught the propaganda nor establish their state. UN occupation until complete.
Honestly, I do think that UN occupation would probably be the way forward here, but I don't see that happening anytime soon, unfortunately. I can't buy that the approval ratings are that high, like 80+%. I don't expect the Israeli government or its apparatuses to be honest with the numbers. I think they're pulling up Trump/Putin. Unfortunately, from what I've seen, I do believe those numbers. It's all horrible.
Piece for that opportunity. And so that's how I view this entire conflict. I would also say that it is really important that we create space, which you do, for dialogue that is thoughtful and dialogue that's rooted in reality and dialogue where we're precise with our words, where we're able to acknowledge there's a lot of nuance on these issues and we should debate them. And just because people have different opinions doesn't make them a bad person. And just because someone doesn't agree with the Netanyahu government, which I don't on many, many things, doesn't make him an anti-Semite. Just because I disagree with Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't make me an anti-Semite. in as much as, because I disagree with Donald Trump, doesn't make me any less of an American patriot.
Oh, okay. But saying that Israel is an apartheid state is a step too far, apparently? Come on.
Wenzel Sharpener and his family need to be dragged to every lowering and destruction of every Israeli flag during this process and the swapping of UN recognition.
It's just, it's just not going to happen, unfortunately. I would love if there was some kind of reckoning for the way Israel has perpetrated like a region-wide war here by bombing Iran and doing a ground invasion of Lebanon and doing a genocide in Gaza and accelerating its settler colonial movement in the West Bank. And unfortunately, while in the United States, the war in Iran is the lowest approved war of all time here in the United States. I just looked it up. According to the Times of Israel, 82% of Israelis support the war in Iran. And that number actually climbs to 93% of Jewish Israelis. According to the Times of Israel. Like, it's, again, like a lot of the conflict, a lot of the fighting, a lot of the violence that is being perpetrated by the settler colonial elements of the Israeli state have insanely high support. Insanely high support. Having different opinions doesn't make you a bad person, really depends on the opinions. Yeah, it does. You like candy in your popcorn? Okay. You think people like me should be dead? You're a bad person. Well, also, just going with the you like candy and popcorn? Okay. You like putting razor blades in the popcorn? Again, like, you can even just stick with the popcorn analogy, and suddenly the opinions can make you quite a heinous individual,
So I just think we've got to be really thoughtful and careful and not just look for buzzwords and not just sort of follow, what's going to get maybe some likes on Twitter, but we've got to be thoughtful about a debate that is really, really hard to have, and we've got to have it.
Yeah, like
discussion, not debate.
Yeah. So I'm somebody that, I see that kind of blurry line between anti-Zionism and
slightly time-lagged, but the nation-state argument is actually complex. I know that certain leftist ideologies don't like the idea of nations. You're talking to a leftist who fundamentally would like to live in a world without nation-states, yeah. But also, and I get it, but a lot of ethnic groups want, and I'm going to stop you right there, Emo Bear writes, I don't think people should form ethnostates. Just ever. Point blank. Ethnostates are bad.
I used to go to the Ren Fair as a kid. My parents bought my brother and I wooden swords and took them away when we hit each other, then stopped buying swords.
Aw, damn. But swords are cool, and you can hit your brother with them. But Sake Tanuki, point taken, and thank you for the 5 tier 1 subs. But also, Emo Bear writes, I understand though that when I'm talking about nation states, the reason I want to frame it not through the right to exist, but rather through power to exist, is because one is talking about an abstract notion and the other is talking about the actual ability to implement the power structure, right? And so there are plenty of people who would, like an angry child might want to declare their bedroom an independent nation, a micronation, if you will. But, like, they might not have the authority to actually enforce any of their laws inside that room. Like, what I'm trying to say here is that, like, also, and you give an example of people like the Kurds, the Basques, and the Irish, and also the Palestinians. I would also be against ethnostates if they had policies to prohibit and, like,
I wonder if Bibi had
ethnically
Epstein
cleanse their
photos
lands
and used them to blackmail Trump into the micropenis conflict.
The micropenis duel. the argument here that like, oh, well, you need an ethnostate to make your people safe. It's the exact same argument made by white nationalists, just as an FYI. And I think it's a bad argument when white nationalists make it. And I think it's a bad argument when any other group makes it. Because again, enforcing an ethnostate means ethnic cleansing. It means enforcing that state via violence. Like, that's what a state does. It is the direction of violence to support an like a power structure. That is what a state is. And so when we're talking about like an ethnostate, it is not just like, oh, people just want to live in peace. No, it is also the enforcement of violence through a social structure, to enforce a social structure. It is not simply like a protective wall you build around a community. It is more than that, and it is more all-encompassing than that. And so I reject this notion that like, well, you know, we should like ethnostates are okay if it's just a very small ethnostate. Like, I don't know, would you feel super comfortable with like the state you live in becoming an ethnostate for like neo-Nazis, where they're able to like enforce neo-Nazi laws and enforce, you know, ethnic cleansing on the state you live in? No, I don't think you'd be comfortable with that. And that's the kind of thing we're talking about here. No, stop it. I'm not going to like caution this argument where you like come into the chat while we're talking about an apartheid state in Israel and then try and say, well, ethnostates might sometimes be good. No, full stop. Stop making the fucking Aryan argument. Like, stop it. You're fucking coming in here and you're saying, well, it's fine if you do a Nazism as long as you're just a bunch of little guys. No, it's not okay. Stop it. Stop twisting your brain like this. It is so unnecessary. God. I do really want to emphasize here, it's the exact same logic that fuels Zionism. It's the exact same logic that fuels the creation and enforcement of the state of Israel itself. And you're just engaging with the same thing. And it's wild to me during this segment that you're just like, well, why can't we just have a little ethnostate? That's literally what we're talking about right now. What you're looking at in Israel is the end result of an attempt to create an ethnostate. And like, it should be pretty obvious that that's bad. It's frustrating as hell. Stop it. Just a whittle ethnostate as a tweet. Stop it.
Anti-Semitism. It was genuinely shocking to see people defend Hamas.
Like in the past segment, I was talking about the economic destruction of the war in Iran. Gonna like the destruction and damage it's gonna do in America because we have a little treat-based economy, a bunch of little treat-based hogs running around, and we called them treatlerites. And it's just like you're just engaging in treatlerite ideology. You're just being like, well, what if we have a whittle ethnostate as a tweet? And it's like, stop it, just stop. You don't have to do this.
The murder of Jews after October 7th, also horrified by what I view as ethnic cleansing that Israel engaged in Gaza, the efforts to annex the West Bank, which are not only just wrong morally, but also put this idea of a two-state solution even further away, make Israel a pariah nation. I think there's a lot of Jewish people who feel this conflict.
I'm not saying they aren't often bad, but I'm wary of making blanket statements because I think the line between homeland and ethnostate can be blurry. It's not. An ethnostate, like, let me put it this way. Maybe you can understand this. I was born in Minnesota. I'm white. If we were to enforce an ethnostate in Minnesota and said, hey, only Scandinavians can live in Minnesota now, it would entail a mass campaign of ethnic cleansing that would then result in hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people being displaced violently by police and military forces in the state of Minnesota. It would involve a mass purging of people, a mass exodus, northern Nakba, if you will, here in Minnesota. And you're saying, well, it might be fine in that case. And like, no, it wouldn't be fine. This might be the place where I was born and raised. This might be the place where I call home. It doesn't give me the right to say, hey, this is now an ethnostate and we are going to violently enforce it. Like, stop it. Well, sometimes the line between an ethnostate and a homeland might be blurred. No, they're two very distinct things that mean very different things, actually. There is a difference.
How do you think about that conflict, that sort of space between the Israel we were taught to believe in growing up and the Israel that we see and how it is conducting itself?
I think, and I write about this a lot in my book, about the first trip I ever took to Israel, about how important, that was for me, how it helped, me get closer connected to my faith and closer connected to my girlfriend who ended.
I'm gonna give you a 30-minute timeout to think about maybe why ethnostates are a heinous thing to advocate for, even some of the time.
Up, becoming my wife years later. I have profound differences from with the policies of Netanyahu, who's largely dominated Israeli politics for the last 2 or more decades. I think he and Trump have politicized and poisoned the relationship between the United States and Israel. And I think at the end of the day, that makes America less safe.
Nope. Man, I didn't think I'd have to, talk this much to chat. Don't use the word Zio in any of my chats. It's a term coined and popularized by David Duke, former Grand Wizard of the KKK. You can come up with other terms, or you can just type out Zionist like a normal person would. Don't use fucking KKK terminology.
I can see the Minnesota ethnic cleansing now. All right there, bucko. We've determined that you're a degenerate, don't you know? Now we're gonna send you to live with the Meese and Canucks in the far north.
Indeed.
And undermines our national security. I look through all of this through the prism of what's best for the United States of America.
Okay, but you can see how perhaps looking through a prism of what is best for our nation state might in fact be an incredibly narrow way to look at a geopolitical conflict and a way that could set us on a path towards ruin by
if one more
having
person tells
significant
me
blind
that Kamala
spots.
should have chosen Shapiro, I hope Zionism makes the DSM-6.
How many people are telling you Kamala Harris should have chosen Josh Shapiro? Josh Shapiro is a particularly unspectacular governor in my eyes. Every single time I see him appear in public, I see him making terrible arguments about how no guys, it's just Netanyahu. It's not the entire cabinet that Netanyahu has. It's not any of the Knesset that is overwhelmingly supportive of Netanyahu. It's none of that stuff. It's just Netanyahu. He's the problem. If we just get someone else in charge of Israel, it'll all the problems will go away. All the settler colonialism will just dissolve. The evil will be defeated. The Blue MAGA are losing their damn minds over this interview. Are they really? Does Blue MAGA think that he did well in this interview? Because this is actual dog shit. He's out there being like, oh, it's not an apartheid state, when literally human rights groups based in Israel have released reports detailing in excruciating detail how it is in fact apartheid. In fact, let me just pull this up. Because I went over this years ago. This exact report from B'Tselem. A regime of Jewish supremacy from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. This is apartheid. This is made by an Israeli human rights group. Okay? This is quite literally just absolutely a great breakdown. I do recommend this report to basically anyone who doesn't understand what goes on with Israel and the occupied territories. Obviously, this was written before the like genocide in Gaza happened. But it explains quite a bit about the conditions that led to everything that you see happening right now. Immigration for Jews only. Any Jew in the world and his or her children, grandparents, and spouses are entitled to immigrate to Israel at any time and receive Israeli citizenship with all of its associated rights. They receive this status even if they choose to live in a West Bank settlement not formally annexed to Israel's sovereign territory. In contrast, non-Jews have no right to legal status in Israeli-controlled areas. Granting status is at the almost complete discretion of officials, the Minister of the Interior, or the military commander in the occupied territories. Despite this official distinction, the organizing principle remains the same. Palestinians living in other countries cannot immigrate to the area between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River, even if their parents, or their grandparents were born and lived there. The only way Palestinians can immigrate to areas controlled by Israel is by marrying a Palestinian who already lives there as a citizen, resident, or subject, as well as meeting a series of conditions and receiving Israeli approval. Like, that, again, just one paragraph from this, one paragraph from this, and it is just like obvious how full of shit Josh Shapiro is on this issue. This article looks great. It is a full-on report of like how the checkpoints work, how immigration works, what area you are in the occupied territories. Like if you're born as a Palestinian in one of these territories, where you're born gives you different rights. Like you have the different ability to travel between cities based on where you were born in the occupied areas. Like it is insane. It is insane. And the people who are saying like, oh, you shouldn't call it apartheid really need to do their damn homework on this.
Hyper-politicization of these kinds of relationships with Israel or with other countries in the realm of foreign policy, I think ultimately works to the detriment of American national security. I think it's fair game to criticize the Netanyahu government. And I'm one who engages in that. You mentioned the West Bank. Let me speak to that. I think what is happening in the West Bank, and I've spoken out quite a bit about this, what's happening in the West Bank, where settlers are taking farms of Palestinians, are assaulting them, where in the case of a kid from Northeast Philadelphia, a Palestinian American, killed him just a week or two ago. I've called on General Bondi to conduct a full investigation about the death of this American.
Oh yeah, I'm sure she'll get right on that.
Young person in the West Bank. I think that is ultimately not in Israel's long-term interests.
That's cool. Unfortunately, the settlements have a huge amount of support in Israel. Yeah, strongly worded
letter.
Like, you can say, oh, well, it's all Netanyahu. It's the Netanyahu government. Except the issue is it's not just the Netanyahu government. Like, when it comes to support of the settlements in Israel, like, basically, there is a colossal financial incentive to engage in investment in the settlements. Because effectively, as long as you build something and prevent it from being knocked down or, burned down or whatever, you get to keep it. Right? So, like, when investors start building a new settlement, it's essentially free real estate for them. They don't have to pay the owner of that land anything because they can just steal it. Like, the financial sector in Israel is super incentivized to invest in settlements. And not only that, when it comes to like popular support, like the majority of like sentiment among Israelis is that either they have really no opinion on it, or they think that, again, this is the 40% of the Israeli public believes that settlements increase their national security, right? 40% of all Israelis. And not only that, there's an additional like 25% that is just kind of in the middle. So only 35% of Israelis think that settlements in the West Bank harm their national security at all. And that's just on the question of national security. Like, that's not even like whether or not they support any of this just generally in any other capacity. Since the policy of creating these settlements began in 1967, every single Israeli government has had a program to encourage these settlements in the occupied territories. Every single one. And now, it is getting close to like 500,000 Israelis live in these settlements, these that are illegal under international law. And again, B'Tselem also has a great breakdown of the settlement policy here. I'm going to link it in chat for you guys as well, so you guys can check that out. Again, B'Tselem, excellent resource on a lot of different things going on when it comes to human rights abuses within Israel and the occupied territories.
I think the Netanyahu government has a responsibility to stamp that out, to stop that lawlessness.
They have a responsibility to stop this lawlessness that has gone on decades before Netanyahu even got into power. Okay.
And I think the American government, the Trump administration, needs to speak up on this and needs to be more of a voice.
How can you say that? My guy, Donald Trump has been openly bragging about building settlements over like the rubble of Gaza. Like, he's been openly like ecstatic about like Trump hotels being built in occupied territory. Why on earth would the Trump administration oppose this when they stand to make a lot of money off of this? Well, I'm going to write them a strongly worded letter and get them to stop. Okay.
Of clarity, moral clarity on this issue.
Right, but those are two things that are just simply not going to happen. Netanyahu wants to annex the West Bank, and Trump and the ambassador to Israel for the United States, Huckabee, believes we're on some sort of biblical crusade. So those two things will not happen as long as Donald Trump is there and Benjamin Netanyahu is there. So then what is the value of, beyond just calling for them to become different people, what do we do?
Well, these are the leaders that each country has chosen. I'm not going to speak to what the people in Israel chose. They'll have an election. They'll figure that out. Here in the United States of America, we need to have more of a check on this administration. That's going to start in these midterms. We've got to win the House of Representatives at least back. And that's why I think we need a national referendum on these policy, on Trump's policies, and encourage everybody, whether you're in a swing state like mine or a state that's maybe not as much of a swing state like yours here in California, to get out, to vote, to make sure our voices are heard, to change the makeup of Congress, and begin to put more checks in place.
Pod Save America is brought to you by Armor Cologne.
The frustrating part about this is that this guy's a governor, right? And like, ostensibly as a governor, you have a significant amount of power to influence, not necessarily the greater country, but definitely things within your state, right? And like, I don't know, I feel like if you are the governor and you have power to do things within your state, you should be doing the things you can in your state to affect a better outcome in that part of the world, because you can do your part.
The leader of the Israeli opposition party has some questions about the conflict, but agrees with it anyway. The whole state cannot exist.
And yet it will sadly and inhumanly continue to murder. But yeah, Sake Tanuki, you point out a very prominent problem here, which is that all the options on the table politically in Israel are terrible. And like, Shapiro isn't going out there and saying, well, these are the policies that my state is going to pursue in order to pressure Israel to stop its expansion of settlements. He's going out there and saying, well, you need to go out there and vote hard so that we can win Congress. And like, yeah, it is important to vote hard and win Congress, but also What are you doing as a governor? Someone who is governing millions and millions of people. You know, like, what are you doing? You should be able to exert some kind of influence. If nations with populations, just out of curiosity, population of Pennsylvania, 13 million people. Population of okay, the entirety of all Scandinavian countries is around 22 million people. So just as an FYI, I guess Sweden would maybe be the most populous of the Scandinavian countries, might be analogous to Pennsylvania. Like, you have the economic capacity and the political capacity to influence 13 million people. What legislation are you putting forward? What are you actually doing? And, like, there's no question about that. It's just, oh yeah, we need to win Congress. That's literally the most obvious thing on the planet. What are you doing as a person of prominence and power who oversees 13 million people? What are you doing? Like, are you going to engage in, like, some form of, like, BDS, boycott, divest, and sanction? Are you going to, I don't know, put political pressure on any American citizen that is engaged in building out these settlements? Like, what are you going to do? You've got to do something about it. When you have that level of power, you got to be doing shit. And the fact that Josh Shapiro just comes on here to basically be like, well, Netanyahu's the real problem. We got to let them sort it out. We got to sort out our stuff here by just voting Democrats in, and then we'll cross the next bridge. No, you should have answers to this right now. So it's just very frustrating to see on a lot of different levels here. I don't know. This was exactly as terrible as I thought it was going to be. And I think some of you understand now why I'm not a huge fan of Pod Save America. Like, I find their line of questioning a bit flaccid, to say the least. I don't know. That's where I'm at. I feel like I've made my positions pretty clear, and I feel like I've criticized this entire thing pretty thoroughly. So, all that being said, if you got anything out of this, folks, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the follow button, leave a comment. Comments longer than 8 words really help in the algorithm. And also, do consider getting involved in your local Democratic Party and your local DSA. Because, folks, we need people to join the local Democratic Party so we can radicalize it, make it more progressive. Consider it, if you will, a boarding of the Democratic ship and jettisoning off the dead weight of these corporate establishment Democrats like Josh Shapiro, who fail us time and time and time again. We need to replace them with people who actually give a shit and are willing to do stuff about the problems in our world, because we are beset by so many problems, and it is very clear that people like Josh Shapiro are not going to help solve those problems. So we need to get people in the room who are going to solve those problems. And we also need people to join the DSA, because if more and more people join DSA and help organize and bring more people in, we can build a working person coalition that is as effective as what it was mobilized in New York City to get Zoran Mamdani elected. And we need, as much as humanly possible, to find solidarity in one another, to fight for working class people, not just here in America, but working class people all across the world, in any place where folks are being oppressed, whether it is Gaza, whether it is in Pennsylvania. We need to be working toward the liberation of all people, okay? And with that being said, folks, join your local DSA, join your local Democrats, and folks, if you need help doing it, join our Discord, reach out to Dragonfly for help organizing with your local Democrats and radicalizing your local Democrats. Dragonfly has a lot of experience doing both. And also reach out to Gamergy for help organizing and making your local DSA more effective. Gamergy's been doing this for a long time and has a lot of great tips and advice for you. Please take advantage of these incredible people who have made themselves resources for this community. And if you don't want to join the Discord, you can come over to riverboat.gg and talk to them in this chat. They are often active here when I'm streaming during normal hours. And last but not least, please check out ImogeneOlivia.com, gender euphoric lingerie designed from the ground up for trans femmes. Also tested with cis men, cis women, non-binary folks. People find it very comfortable. It is non-tucking lingerie, very sexy, and it actually fits. So check it out. We got new styles, sizes, and colors coming in the near future. ImogeneOlivia.com. Check it out. Link down below in the doobly-doo. Let's keep on going.
Riverboat Deck is coming to town. All the viewers gather round. Twitch and YouTube and swishy streams. All that content is bursting the seams. Politics, gaming, and plenty more. Your sense of fashion you'll adore. So grab your stuff and hop aboard. We're going straight to Jack's Discord.